Welcome into the Rochford Files on a cooler Saturday afternoon from the Mile Highland City. Coming to you from the host coming to you from kind of between the coast. This is Andrew Rochford once again, and today's stream is going to be heavily focused on the news that finally got confirmed after a few weeks ago when there was speculation that Roe versus Wade was going to get overturned. So that news is real now. And that's an issue that is getting a lot of people to get their thoughts out there. That's been a thing that I've noticed a lot of people who normally don't weigh in on political issues in this country. That's the one moment where they finally decide to say something. And as you're going to see throughout, a big theme of this stream is it's important to try to get these people to extend that engagement over to other issues, because just coming out for Roe versus Wade won't be good enough. There's a shit ton of issues that need the solidarity from those people as well. Not just that one, getting all these white liberals out of the woodworks for it. And you're also going to see some of these liberals, they're unprincipled on racism. So I got an example of that I'll eventually bring up at some point during the stream. But let's see. Where do I want to start first? There's a ton of avenues that this goes into. And whether it's the police state, electoralism, direct action, we've got a lot to break down here. And I honestly think it's probably a good point to start off with what Joseph Biden said first yesterday. So I forgot which tab that was on. But yeah, I think Joseph Robinette Biden's little video is an absolute good starting point, especially since he's the president. And even though liberals are going to argue that Democrats do not currently have the power to do anything, they are capable of doing things. So let's start right here, shall we?
I call on everyone, no matter how deeply they care about this decision, to keep all protests peaceful. Peaceful, peaceful, peaceful. No intimidation. Violence is never acceptable. Threats and intimidation are not speech. You must stand against violence in any form, regardless of your rationale. I call on everyone, no matter.
And here's where this is why a guy like Joe Biden will always be antithetical to justice, because he is always going to choose order over justice. If you remember, a big point of reference of Martin Luther King Jr. is the white liberal, the white moderate. When you put them between fascism and socialism, they're gonna naturally gravitate towards fascism. When it's all said and done, when you scratch a liberal, a fascist bleeds. And what we've seen from the moment that Joe Biden has taken office, he's essentially been the blue authoritarian fascist, offering very little difference from Donald Trump. And the annoying part about last year was the amount of the left who wasted bandwidth on the pointless semantics of trying to argue that Joe Biden is still better. You've got to be fucking kidding me on that part. But here's the thing. Joe Biden, when does he ever complain about the state violence, the military industrial complex, the police state? Never. And if he acknowledges a moment of wrongdoing from the police state, what is his response? It is to give them more money. And we've all seen by now the countless amount of times that Democrats like Joe Biden, when they tell you that the police need more money for better training, when we know that is an absolute counterproductive solution to said problem. And there's this whole misnomer that Joe Biden is part of the good. He's one of the good guys. But he really isn't. There's a lot of Democrats out there who should be treated with the same disdain as liberals would hold for Republicans. But at the end of the day, when your politics are only based in tribalistic team sports, you're never going to pull yourself away from that line of thinking. And you know why it's important to talk about why Joe Biden's obsession with order is? Because this police state will be the first line of force for enforcing anti-abortion laws. Also, when women try to get their alternate forms of contraception, because you know that there are states who are going to try to take away women's rights to make it much harder for them to get pregnant. And I think I noticed earlier today that 30 states are in the works of like the IVF ban in addition to this whole anti-abortion, because make it make sense. You don't want women to get abortions, but you also don't want to allow them the ability to better safeguard against them getting pregnant. But back to the main point that needs to be addressed with President Biden. It's the fact that he's always going to be counterproductive to, and he'll be adversarial the moment that corporate media will start to highlight moments. Oh, good to see you're here, Risky Opinions. I'm very sad that they turned Roe versus Wade. I'm a trans man and I can't believe they are taking away my abortion rights. And this is why it's important to, this is where this dangerous decision can lead to next, is attack on LGBTQ rights all over the United States as well, quickly undoing the legalization of gay marriage. And I am keeping an eye out because in Denver this weekend, there's a Pride of parade both days. So I wonder if there's going to be a change of tone in those events. I took a look earlier to see if I could see anything from downtown that looked to resemble a moment of protest, but I haven't seen that yet. And I also wouldn't be able to. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just pointing out that's where the Supreme Court can go to next, is attack on LGBTQ rights. But let's shift into what happened at the state capitol with the House. And it's look at how unserious this is.
Night with the light from above, from the mountains to the prairie, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home sweet home. The night with the light from above.
Holy fuck. Are you serious? And this tweet has been this is a tweet of mine that has been blowing up over the past plus day. And my reply to it, our expectations were low for you, were low, but holy fuck. And I also believe that Twitter is now suppressing the overall like count on that in addition to it. As you can see here, that this, on a day like this, you got House Democrats singing a song that screams and bleeds American exceptionalism. Yes, even an alternative form of that gets sung in place of the national anthem at times, or at another point, or I should also say Sunday afternoon baseball games. You get God Bless America during the seventh inning stretch. And in this moment, when we should be all in on action, you should be wanting your politicians to be hard in to pushing for action and real results when it comes to fighting. But all they offer you is performative matter actions that will do nothing to change the harm that is going on with making it unsafe for women who are in very conservative states to take care of themselves and having the bodily autonomy. And there's a lot of people who are very inconsistent on bodily autonomy. And when I say that, it's because there's a lot of people who suddenly come out against the Supreme Court making this decision. But at the same time, many of these people were for the jab mandates last year and going into this year as well. So there's a lot of inconsistency from those people who are pro choice and pro mandate. And they would also, some of these people who got really deep into the whole pro mandate argument, they were making pretty much the same parallel of an argument a pro life person makes. Like for the mandate, they were out there saying that it's your it's not your choice, that if you're negatively affecting other people's lives, then that shouldn't be your choice. And it's the same type of pro life argument, which really just translates to pro birth when it's all said and done, about how they try to say that you're affecting other people with that choice. And that's why you shouldn't be allowed to have bodily autonomy over your body. And the same thing can apply with, and I just hope those people who were on the left making those pro mandate arguments realize the hypocrisy of getting to that point last year, because you are effectively sounding just like the pro life people who are happy about this Supreme Court overturning away Roe versus Wade last year. And I think it's a good moment to work in someone else, someone from the right on this. Here we go. And this is Megyn Kelly. And she's coming out in defense of the Supreme Court's decision. And I'm also going to tell you why it's garbage to accept a legalese based justification for this decision. Whether you are pro abortion or not, this was the right decision legally. You may not like it, but you were lied to by the Roe and Casey justices who told you abortion was a constitutional right. This court sets things straight, and it's now where it belongs, in the hands of the people. And it's also important to say how this just isn't true. Even if this still wasn't, we were still, this decision was still left up into the fate of 9 Supreme Court justices who the people have no real say over. So instead of people, fucking liberals, still harping on the point that this happened because you wouldn't vote for Hillary, where that's such faulty logic, as Democrats have had numerous opportunities to change the rules to the game if they really want to get shit done. They could have codified it during Bill Clinton's 2 terms. You remember Barack Obama said codifying Roe versus Wade into the land of law was one of his first things he would do when he got into office. Do y'all remember what Barack Obama said after he got into office? The 3 to 4 month period, with a super majority, by the way, it's not a priority now. And the reason why it's important to point out how Barack Obama and other Democrats are going to continue to pull fucking bait and switch tactics on you. And this is what happens when you continuously give your votes away to a party who will continuously not do shit for you. Look, and I think it's important to point out that the fundraising grift is on in a big way. But next, I think it's time to get back on point here. And this is why my mind is not prisoner to legalese speak like that Megyn Kelly is espousing. Because the law is extremely flawed, extremely unjust, the application of it, that is, and applied very unequally. And back to the original end point of this tweet here, a Supreme Court of 9 people, who, by the way, have no say over the justices who get confirmed or not. Because even if if they had to get elected, and specifically by a popular vote, no one the Republicans could nominate for Supreme Court would win. Now, if we move beyond a system of that, then if we had a true democracy, then we wouldn't have a need for a Supreme Court to determine political policy, because this is essentially what the Supreme Court is now: an unelected bureaucracy who gets to decide policy and law instead of being a system to just and in a system which doesn't do the whole affecting of public policy in this country. They just uh, weigh in on cases, but the problem is they also use cases as a basis for changing law when the people should be able to make that determination on policy. And this is where the major problem with our political system lies. And that's the fact that this system is built on hoping to have the right people in Congress. But the reality is, even the ones who run on the most progressive message, they aren't doing shit once they get there. And the moment they make it is the moment that they get converted away from ever following through on any of their campaign promises. And the problem is now it the states this whole argument that it's suddenly more up to the people once it gets to the states is absolutely asinine. Look, these states that are going to be, well, 13 right off the bat that could be uh, doing a full ban of abortion rights, the abortion choice as well, are the ones where they are some of the most gerrymandered states in favor of pro birth Republicans. And this argument just takes uh, a false illusion in one sense, and makes it even more of a false illusion of the whole power of the people. Because if power to the people really existed, look, 70% of the country is in favor of Roe versus Wade and a women's right to choose. And we hear the right complain a lot about not being ruled by mob. Guess what? It's happening right fucking now. We are being ruled by a mob. Except it's not no woke majority mob that you like to fearmonger over. No, it's a minority mob of the rich and powerful. Those are the ones that are really ruling right about now. And they have been waiting for an opportunity over the past several years to strip back and roll back basic human rights. And COVID was the perfect opportunity for them to start to do it. And they're testing us. It started with the mandates last year, but even though a bit of rallies against mandates started, and how even though Democrats have mostly backed off on it, it's the fact that that went the way they wanted it to. It was easy for them to paint that as just right wing, just because of how little people understand anti mandate arguments from the left. And I think it's important. I got to find that Clarence Thomas quote from yesterday. I think that's a good point of discussion next, because I didn't have that one queued up. So let me find that quote for y'all real quick. And let's see. Okay, this thing will work to illustrate the next point. And this comes from the Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Just keep in mind that the current president, Joe Biden, helped Clarence Thomas get into the Supreme Court in the early 90s. So, and also, Joe Biden has an anti-choice past. Following the overturning of Roe v. Wade, Justice Clarence Thomas writes that the Supreme Court should reconsider rulings that protect contraception, same-sex relationships, and same-sex marriage. That is batshit crazy. That. But this is how the Supreme Court is tilted in the favor of Republicans. And when it's all said and done, if you're punching down on people who didn't want to vote for the Democrat Party, then you're focusing on the wrong people. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, Democrats have had countless opportunities to change the rules to the game. But instead, what we see is Republicans are willing to change the rules of the game in their favor. But anytime that you ask Democrats to play a bit dirty, bend the rules in their favor, they are extremely against it. And the worst part about choosing order over justice is this concept even applies in terms of the political arena. I mean, come on. It'd be one thing if you're going to argue for order over justice when it comes to the protesting space. If I actually see that you're trying to change the rules to get shit done, but when you're choosing to play by the rules in the political arena as well, then I'm definitely gonna hate on that too. Look, another important point to mention from Joe Biden's speech yesterday was the fact that he also came out Again, repeating the point that he's against packing the court. Is it ultimately a stopgap solution? Probably yes. But would I much rather see parties continuously add Supreme Court, add to the Supreme Court repeatedly in order to uh, shift the major? Yeah, that would actually be much more preferable to see the Supreme Court continuously grow each time. That way, the parties can get a majority back in their favor. Because that at least by tiny minuscules of percentage points would at least start to get slightly more representative over time. I mean, look, right now, Joe Biden could have already avoided this from happening if he decided to add 5 more Supreme Court seats. 5, 4, 6. This could already have been a non issue. And look, as well, he could have made it a 7-6 or a 9-6 liberal majority. But even as I say that, let me remind you, there will be moments that even this conservative court will bend on a social issue here and there. But even if Biden packed the courts like he should, it's the easiest thing to do in this moment. Then look, they would still be heavily pro corporation. Heavily. And it would be a lot like your regular uh, congressional votes. The justices will play rotating villain, and they'll also be the rotating face as well. They've had their uh, as much as liberals still buy into the line of thinking that Democrats do not have the power to maneuver their way into doing anything to help improve conditions is a flat out lie. And what's even worse is, let's say this issue is enough to somehow increase their tiebreaker majority. What we know is there's always going to be a new rotating villain to pop up and make sure that shit won't get done. I mean, even in that short supermajority time with Barack Obama, there was a moment. There was that rotating villain in Joe Lieberman. And there will be a new one to pop up if somehow the Democrats manage to get a stronger majority than what they are under now. And that's going to be a very, very uphill battle for them. Especially with the way they have not figured out a good way to address this inflation. Even though I guess Biden was going to introduce a 3-month tax break on gas. Nancy Pelosi came out and blocked that. But this is the problem with liberals. And this ties in to the whole Clarence Thomas. And look at this. Does the N-word realize his rights are next? And this is the derangement that you get with liberals. The moment that black people veer away from the party. And it also shows you how liberals are the ones who are going to be some of the strongest, loudest voices to point out racism from the Republicans. But the moment that they see a black man who goes against the Democratic agenda, they have to resort to expressing it in racism. And we already know how much your conservatives, they don't pretend to be this good anti-racist person. They are pretty much tolerate the covert racism, dog whistles. But the thing is, I at least think when those moments happen from a conservative, I at least think they know what they're getting into. But when it's a liberal who does it, they are so oblivious to what they're doing. And this woman even tried to argue it's not racist to illustrate a point I'm making here. That's some absolute clown shit right there. And it also goes a good moment to teach people that you can argue against someone without resorting to racism. It's easier than you think. And there's a lot of white people out there who like to invoke they think just because they see other black people resort to that type of language on other black people who are ideologically different than them. These are the type of white people who think it's okay to join in on that. The N word, the C word. They also think of the UT. Those are the white liberal suddenly thinks it's okay the moment that they, and not realizing that it's just some words that cannot be used by anyone who isn't black when it comes down to it. And there's so many times that liberals get constantly blown up by the racism landmines. And they don't even realize it. But at the same time, conservatives, their understanding of racism is far too simplistic, and it's actually a much more complex issue than you think. You can still be racist if you have black friends, you have a black partner, and that's the complexity of it. They think just because you get accepted by someone that it automatically means it's gone. But it's really not that simple. And yes, black and brown women in these deeply conservative states are going to be the ones who will likely suffer most to the anti abortion laws that are about to come down in those states. But there's like 20 states where there's pretty solid protections on women's choice. Me being in one here in Colorado. But it's important to point out the fundraising from They Waste No Time. Oh, here we go. So the Gravel Institute shared this. Nancy Pelosi just sent a fundraising email off the decision. I need your immediate attention. Trump's Supreme Court just ruled to rip reproductive rights away from every single woman in this country. I don't say this lightly. How can we act today will decide the future of reproductive rights. We can either sit back and admit defeat to these far right extremists, or we can rise up, meet this once in a generation moment, and marshal a response so historic that we make every last anti choice Republican regret what they've done. Please, I've never needed your support more than today. Can you chip in $15 so we can win these midterms and finally codify reproductive rights into law? Ah, this is rich. Coming from the woman who constantly says we need a strong Republican Party in this country. She tries to say it in a way that she would like to see the Republicans return to the 90s version of itself. Like that's any better when today's Democratic Party is largely the 90s Republicans now. And this woman shielded hard for a anti-choice Democrat in Henry Cuellar to block off a progressive pro-choice challenger last month. And she got help from Jim Clyburn and Chuck Schumer. And you suddenly think she's going to get serious about reproductive rights? Seriously. Look. Nancy Pelosi also is one of the big voices talking about this whole big tent bullshit where we can work with pro life Democrats and whatnot. And how she used to say that Roe versus Wade wasn't a priority. She's very much responsible for these conditions that led to this possibility coming to fruition. But sure, Yaz, queen it up. Rip up another stack of papers. And maybe that'll be enough to appease your highly propagandized shitlibs. The performative queen was also at it when she decided to read a freaking poem during her moment of speaking.
I am personally overwhelmed by this decision. From time to time, I quote this poem by Ehud Manor. He's an Israeli poet. I met his wife when I've been in Israel. He says, I have no other country, even though my land is burning. Only a word in Hebrew penetrates my veins, my soul, with an aching body and with a hungry heart. Here is my home. I will not be silent, for my country has changed her face. Country has changed her face. I shall not give up on her. I shall remind her and sing into her ears until she opens her eyes. Clearly, we hoped that the Supreme Court would open its eyes. I am personally overwhelmed by this decision. From time to time, I quote this.
Of course, using an Israeli poet from a country that is very locked in to being the U.S. imperialist right hand man, that same Israel. This is always how Democrats are going to try to placate you. Singing tone deaf songs, reading poetry that serves no purpose. If anything, it just the only purpose that really served was showing her support to Israel. Which, by the way, if you're in the whole sphere of being like the United States, being lockstead, then you're going to have quite a lot of similarities in your country. And also, got to go back to the Kent to cloth. Just after the George Floyd protest, where they decided that was enough. Give you the symbolic victories. So, what's the goal now? Wearing the pink hats again? To try to placate you? Because that's the potential of what could happen. But I also thought it would be funny to share this. This comes from Alan McLeod, who pointed out a tweet from Eve Fartlow. Look at this. Good save by Alan. He's a reporter of Mint Press News. Very good account to follow, by the way. And here's her. Fuck all this. I'm moving to Israel, a progressive country. You know, it's sad. The United States is far closer to becoming another Israel in terms of social issues than they are of being a country that actually values human rights. You know, there's a bunch of hypocrisy that makes you believe that countries like Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba, China are the ones who are uh, performing human rights abuses. But it's happening right here at home. Oh, don't forget Ukraine either. The country that they are pouring endless billions of dollars into, including another 200-300 million of support in weapons aids. And also, Ukraine is not exactly a beacon of human rights either, especially when the way they treat Russian citizens in the country and trying to ban Russian languages and Russian literature. Are you sure that that's not being pro Ukraine is not the flex that you think it is? And this is ironic coming from a woman in Fartlow who constantly denies the oppression, the abuse that the Palestinian people have been taking from Israel, the apartheid, the Israeli colonizers who come in and steal Palestinians' property. Seriously, how's that a progressive country? She may feel like she identifies more with Israel, but I bet you that country is far more similar to the United States, not in a good way, the bad ways, than she will ever be willing to acknowledge. And you're always going to think that way when you're a Zionist like her, where Zionists are just like another version of white supremacist here. And they act just like them too, with the colonizing, the racism, the systematic oppression. The parallels are really strong. And people like the Palestinians also have to be part of the group that we fight for human rights for. I've said before, if you only care about things domestically, then you're never going to get anything change here. But if you actually are a good anti-imperialist, anti-war person, then you just may have a chance to advocating for liberation for people abroad as well. Then you just very well may have the chance to improve conditions here as well. And it's frustrating because a moment like Roe versus Wade is a moment where we notice new people suddenly getting weighing in on this issue. I mean, it is easy to be critical of them, give them a bit of that tough love by calling them out for why are you just being vocal now. But the thing is, we also have to use that as a moment to point out why it's important to have that same energy for universal health care, because just stopping at Medicare for all won't be good enough. I mean, it's better than anything else that's uh, been offered into the discourse, but it's not the absolute stopping point for the best possible healthcare that we could have either. Also, need you to realize how antithetical the police state is to accomplishing any of these goals. We saw in the police violence happen a bit. And this, I think I got this queued up. But Tina Desiree Berg suffered violence at the hands of the police last night while going out to LA to cover some protest. So here it is. Get a load of that bullshit. These fucking pieces of shit push a woman around like Tina Desiree Berg, who does reporting with Status Coup. One moment, they push her around. Then in the next breath, they'd say they're trying to protect her. But this is the logic. Look up 40% of the police. They're abusers. So it's no surprise that police with this abusive mentality tell you they're doing it for your own good. And it's sad because there's still liberals who aren't getting it yet. The police state cannot be reformed. Flat and simple. And there's countless moments that we point out to as an example of why that is. And we should have really gotten it fully clear in the brains after seeing how police handled the Uvalde shooting. Numerous officers outside of the school blocking the school off but not doing shit. Then this week, you see footage from inside the school, and there were a couple officers standing outside the classroom, not doing shit either. And when it comes down to it, the police do not work for us. Their purpose is to protect property and the powerful. And this just continues to confirm the evidence of how that is true. If you're challenging the power structure in this country, then yes, the police are going to clamp down on you. And I mean, last night in DC, during when 10 to 20,000 people, I think, were in the streets from that, the cops are right on their asses. And you look at the rare moments, and there's a reason for that. Look at whenever white supremacist groups are out in the streets, the police let them be free. And that's going to be the part of the uphill battle of direct action, is because if anything serious blows up off of these protests, then guess what? Just like the George Floyd protest, when they tear gas you, shoot people with rubber bullets, running people over, they're going to go to that again. And you know what corporate media is going to say? They're just going to blame the protesters. Now, you had to have done something wrong, when the evidence is 97% peaceful protest back in 2020, more than 2 years ago. But seriously, if you are more focused on complaining about the small minuscule 3% of non-peaceful protest as opposed to the rampant police violence that has gone on for years and years and years, which is, by the way, killing 3 people per day, then you aren't focused on the right issue. Let's go to another right. Now it's time to bring the capitalist aspect of this into play. Then this right-wing rapper Zuby posts this. Look at this dumbass meme with a bunch of happy kids photoshopped over a grave. And this is absolutely stupid, for one, because of the fact that pro-life is ultimately pro-birth. You know why? Because the capitalists want more poor cogs in poverty to work for them at non-living wages. They wouldn't want them to have anywhere close to a chance of that rare hope for the potential of a thriving wage. And this is why it's so annoying, because apparently this guy was actually on the right side of the anti-mandate arguments. But this is where the hypocrisy of being inconsistent from the right comes into play. Because, look, being pro life is ultimately just being pro birth. You know, there's a baby formula shortage going on. And guess what? This political system is not adequately addressing that. So, you really want more women to have babies when they're going to struggle to get formula? Think about it. Where they're going to have a harder time with education early on, where kids are probably suffering through the mental health issues that the past couple years of living through COVID has done to a lot of people. And you think taking away a woman's choice is a good way to address that? The whole the stagnant wages, and even if you do somehow benefit a bit from the artificial wage increase depending on where you live, the fact that it's getting ate up by inflation and the rising gas prices. Think about that for a moment. Having to pay an important amount of money for childcare, and they also have to think about paying $5 to $8 per gallon in terms of taking that into consideration for their commute as well. This is why the pro choice crowd is so unserious. Don't forget the lack of pushing for universal health care. In fact, there will be another March for Medicare for All event at the end of next month, so I'll have to promote that towards the end of the stream. But the thing is, the capitalist class really doesn't give a fuck about the worsening conditions of the people are going through each and every day. But at the same time, the people who are suddenly coming out for this Roe versus Wade, but also need to make the connection to the other issues that I've been pointing out. I mean, the Supreme Court also ruled, even though some liberals are upset at the fact that they ruled against New York trying to enact stronger gun control. Given what's taken place, do you really want the police state to be the ones to have the guns against you? I mean, there will be a time and place where gun control could happen, but as long as the state is the one in power, we have to work on weakening that power first before we can have real serious discussions on gun control. Flat and simple. And I say that as someone who used to be a liberal who got a bit passionate about the gun control thing, but now, with the way that conditions are in this country, gun control is not a priority. My focus is on making sure that marginalized communities get their opportunity for liberation, and also the class war, the class struggle, and how race and class are all very interconnected into it. Especially since there's some of the left who gets mad at race reductionist, and there's also parts of the left that get upset at class reductionist. When the right answer is to have both things balanced out right. Oh, I got a lot. I think I'm gonna. I think we'll take a bit of time to touch on this. I can't help but wonder if Susan Sarandon is proud of herself. And that's Brooklyn Dad to Fight. And we've seriously still got liberals trying to blame Susan Sarandon for something she has no control over. When, let's be honest, if Susan Sarandon had the power that you thought she did, I'm sure she would have codified Roe versus Wade into law a long ass time ago. And think about all that the almighty powerful Susan Sarandon could have done for us. Imagine it. A nationalized healthcare system. I imagine that even though she cowered a bit for calling all those that big ass police gathering a form of displaying fascism, you have to believe that she would have wanted to substantially undo the power of the police state. Imagine where wages would be if Susan Sarandon had the power that liberals like to give her. Uh, think about how COVID would have been handled under the almighty Susan Sarandon. People, even if you still question the impact of what lockdowns would have done, I think people would have at least been in a better state of mental health if they just had a secure form of money to survive that. In addition to that, I think an expanded mental health, a little thing that would have altered the outcome of lockdowns here, while also acknowledging how the way the United States did their lockdown here just ended up producing some pretty bad results. And knowing how terrible the United States is on that, we still had laptoppers who are still advocating for lockdowns until very recently. I'm sorry, but when I see a neoliberal hellhole and the destruction it does, that sometimes you pick your poison, and you don't want them to do the worst version of the more right thing. But it's annoying though. But I'm sure that if Susan Sarandon had the power that these liberals like to give her, I would probably be drinking out from. I'd probably have a Susan Sarandon mug myself, and I'd be making sure to use that during every stream, or a Susan Sarandon water bottle. Now it's time to shift gears into the sports world, and this is going to be a bit surprising for some of you. But look at Dave Portnoy of Barstool. This is a guy that, if you know anything about me and him will not uh, will will not be aligned very often. But this is one of those rare moments where Portnoy is actually saying the right things.
Okay, emergency press conference. Roe versus Wade just got overturned. Let me start by saying this is a Dave Portnoy press conference. This doesn't reflect Barstool, all right? Barstool is 300 whatever people. They all may think certain ways. This is just me, how I feel. I feel like I have to speak on this issue. I already talked about it a little bit. To me, this is just pure insanity. Pure insanity. We are going backwards in time. We are literally going backwards in time. It makes no sense how anybody thinks it's their right to tell a woman what to do with her body. I just don't get it. To take away the ability to make informed decisions on how they want to live their lives is bananas. I know people will be like, well, no, it's a constitutional issue. They're just giving it to the states. Well, like what? 20 states are saying they're going to overturn it right away? And what if you're poor in that state and you can't go to another state? Things like that. It's just nuts to me. Not to mention, the same people are saying, they want to take it away, overturn it, are also like, we got to protect guns because of the Constitution. At what point do you look at the Constitution and say, hey, this was written by people who had slaves? Maybe not everything is exactly to a T in the Constitution. Like a million years from now, you're going to use a document written in the... It's just nuts in what world. The world evolves, people evolve, technology evolves. You got to evolve. You can't stick with this document and look at that and be like, that's the end-all, be-all. It's literally crazy pills. This is coming from somebody who consistently is like, the U.S. is the best country in the world by a mile. I still believe it, but we're going backward. And the left and the right suck so fucking bad. Like, the left fucking hates me. The woke left liberals are crazy. They're insane people. Yet, I end up having to vote for a moron like Biden because the right is going to put Supreme Court people in who are just ruining this country, taking basic rights away. I honestly believe 95% of people in the country think like me. They're liberally, they're socially liberal, and they're financially conservative. They like 90% of what Republicans, they don't like the woke culture, all this craziness. But then you look at what they're doing, and it's like you're taking away basic rights. What's next? Same-sex marriage? Like, what is next? It's insane. That's why we have to vote for the moron like Biden, who's borderline incompetent, because it's too dangerous to vote Republican. Like, what the fuck are we doing? Wake up!
Wow. I'm going to give that a semi-based Dave Portnoy right there. I can't go full because he's pushing the lesser of two evilism. Other than that, he's this is one of his better political moments, man. He is right when things are getting taken backwards. Even though he's more right than some of the liberals who come out on this. Then there's also that crowd of the left, like if you're like a Steve Poikonen spear of the left, or who It's like I've been way ahead on talking about the rolling back of human rights. And those people are right, and they're usually have been pointing out stuff that only a true fringe has really cared about. And someone like Portnoy really probably speaks well to a conservative who has been a traditional Republican voter. But there's this, we gotta debunk a bit that fiscally conservative talking point. Because there's been plenty of cases where socialists are doing things, they're actually more fiscally conservative. They propose things that are more fiscally conservative than what currently exists now. Look, if you have an anti-war socialist majority government, think about how much less money will be pulled away from the racket of war. Next, the police state. The taking the money out of Wall Street and the lobbyist. Next, some of the biggest money waste that the ruling class currently has are some of the most fiscally irresponsible spending that we see flat out, period. And that we would actually be a more fiscally conservative country even if we made a greater embrace to socialism. And that's one point I'm going to make to a person like Portnoy is the fact that living in socialism can actually be more fiscally conservative in the United States than what we see right now. A system living in fascism where corporations and lobbyists control our government. And think about if socialist country actually regulated these corporations into being more pro-worker. And the thing is, when you do that type of stuff, it has to be done federally. There's far too much money in the United States to take their ball and go home. The United States is a very rich country. But the problem is, the people are poor. Going back to that good old Michael Parenti speech of how many countries are rich. But the difference is, the more developing a country is, the more poor the people are. And there's this false belief, which is based in American exceptionalism, that the United States is a first world country, when we just keep seeing the signs that it's anything but that. And given the amount of poverty that people in this country are having to endure, the uncontrolled, unregulated inflation, the people are poor here. When Michael Parenti made that speech back at the University of Colorado in the 80s, when that video gave him that Shrek looking skin, the countries are rich, but the people are poor. It's time that we now start including the United States in that group of countries. And the mental association of that leads the common person to think that a lot of these countries in the global south fit the whole people are poor. Guess what? The United States is that country too. Rich, powerful people controlling us, and they give us peanuts, just barely enough crumbs to keep grinding away. And the reason why it's important to point out the whole fiscally conservative argument, blowing that aspect of it apart, is the fact that what I believe is the social and fiscal issues are more connected than what people are led to believe. Even though a lot of human rights get used as wedge issues, it's the fact that there's a lot of woke liberals who like to lead us off the cliff with with their majorly strong wokeness. The craziness that Dave Portnoy points to. Well, just know, Dave, there are people on the left who criticize the woke liberals as well. And the reason why we do is because those people stand in the way of progress for us. They're the ones who are telling us not to work with social conservatives to make progress on economic issues. And as we see, there are some socialist countries out there, in the global south that is, that are pretty socially conservative. But the difference is, I think people in those countries know how to work with each other to achieve economic change. And what too many people lose sight of here, especially on that the synthetic left types, is the fact that, hey, we can work on economic issues A, B, C, D, F, and G. They take their eyes off the prize just because they aren't with them on the social issues, where a lot of economic issues have the chance to improve conditions socially as well. And this is why, like for example, on trying to achieve the goal of universal healthcare, or reallocating funds away from the police state, defund the police, is the fact is if we can just use conservatives to get the wins that we can get, and just maybe you may be able to get them to change their minds on some social issues in the process. And that's the difference between someone on the left as opposed to liberals. We see the big picture here. They, on the other hand, are very much the victim of the I support the big thing. 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 And that's why, and that's the play that I would make here coming off this, because it's pretty easy to see this, and they can even feel like voting blue no matter. There's a small amount of those who suddenly feel like this pivoted them. But even the people who decide not to vote Republican for all anymore after this should also be understanding of the fact that Democrats will not follow through and they won't get this shit done through electoralism flat out. Is there anything? I think I'm feel like I've gotten a lot in. So I'm going to show a Breitbart article, but only because they collected a bunch of tweets from the sports world, and I'll just mainly focus on the tweets they collected for the article. It isn't about anything they write. So look here, the WNBA made a statement, as you would expect, because the WNBA is usually pretty reliable for coming out to the forefront on social issues. And then they showed a tweet from New York, New Jersey Gotham Football Club. Tennis player Billie Jean King. Supreme Court has struck down Roe v. Wade, which for nearly years has protected the right to abortion. This decision will not end abortion, but will end as safe and legal access to this vital medical procedure. That part is true. I'm not sure who Rasul is. We knew America was worried about the wrong shit estimate. RG3, a guy who people pinked for being more conservative than you would expect. I think that was due to his military upbringing, that he's shown to be more socially liberal than you would think. The Supreme Court paved the way for women to be forced to give birth, denying women the right to make decisions over their bodies. For all the progress women have made in this country, today was devastating for women's rights. Women are under attack. Then I guess Andrea Paganelli is part of the Gotham FC as well. You can see from their tweet there. I think this is a reporter, Andy Herman. NFL, faith is incredible. Religion is a cancer. I think it's important to make a distinction there. I'm atheist, but the fact that religion isn't a cancer. What is? How? The cancerous part is these evangelical right wingers who use it to enforce law over people who do not believe in said religion. Because what I believe is the United States needs to be a secular nation, one that is respects religious difference, and that means you cannot put policy or govern on a basis of one religion over another. And no, that's one example of where the Constitution is a problem. One of the big points that I didn't even touch on quite yet from the Dave Portnoy video. It's the fact that Why are we still letting a constitution from hundreds of years ago dictate things today? We are supposed to evolve with the times. And being stuck in the past on a antiquated parts of the Constitution is not the way to go about it. Kyle Long, strange to me, the same folks that claim my body, my choice on vaccines are the same ones to strip that right from women. This isn't a political discussion, it's a human. And for the record, I'm not sure where Kyle stands on this, but as I mentioned earlier, I've tried to point out both sides of the hypocrisy of being inconsistent on bodily autonomy. This is Aaron Nagler. I think he works at Fox Sports. Supreme Court really just Friday news dumped their decision to take away the protection of a woman's right to choose. What a country. Super gutted, broken heart emoji. Pro football talk, a political observation on a historic day. Regardless of your views, we are two countries living within one set of borders. And it's only going to get worse, and it's not sustainable. And that right there is, if you're living based in the belief that that right there is still a basis of a red team, blue team type of thing. If anything, we are living in a country where a small minority mob rules the way we live our life. That's the way you got to think about it. 99% against 1. That's the mindset of this here. Because the ruling class, they're pulling all the strings to keep the people divided and fighting against each other. And that's where this pro football talk account is going to be off base here. But because he does not see the big picture here, and I imagine that he's going to fall victim to all the culture war stuff that probably keeps him arguing with conservatives. Because if you are seeing part of the big picture, you would break away from those moments and punch up to the ruling class. This person, Janice, saddened and disappointed. There's no way I'm sticking to sports today. Please donate to Abortion Mutual Aid Organization if you can. Great point. Because if there's one thing you take away from watching this stream, do not donate to politicians. Use that money where you can actually help women who are being harmed by having their choice taken away. And that is finding a mutual aid organization help. There are several things to put mutual aid into. Regardless of what you choose, make sure that money does not go into the hands of the politician to fill up their pockets, while that money could have directly helped anyone in any type of mutual aid. Erica L. Ayala. Remember this week when they tell you insert anything that involves people isn't political? Religion, sports, education, relationships, abortion, blue pills, housing. All this and decide by people you can't even name. And that's the problem with the this limited thinking that people have in their political analysis is that there's probably people making the choices that you can't even think of right now. And while we should be making life a living hell for anyone who is complicit in making our conditions worse, just know that it's probably some unknown person who's pulling the strings behind them that you're not even thinking about. And what's interesting about that is, why would Breitbart share some tweet that probably comes off as less liberal at face value? Joy Taylor of Fox Sports. We're really going back in time. Charlotte Wilder. It matters that men speak up in the sports world, go to a protest, donate to abortion funds. That doesn't affect you this time. That doesn't mean the next thing they come for won't. There's no such thing as a stick to sports situation where rights are stripped away. And I can tell you that this whole pro-choice thing is going to extend to a lot more. I mean, as I mentioned, the LGBTQ community is the common next logical connection. But don't forget, another way standing up for women's rights, sex work, yes. Protecting their right to be sex workers. That's another big connecting issue here, is because if this isn't even about the abortion, it's about taking away their ability to get the basic contraception that makes it easier for them to perform their sex work. Yesterday, the 50th anniversary of Title Act 9 to give girls equal rights in sports. Today, the revocation of 50 years of abortion rights. Take nothing for granted. Women's Sports Matter believes abortion rights are human rights. Taking away abortion access will not stop abortions. This will make it extremely unsafe, and people could die. And also, other people besides women get abortions, and we should use inclusive language when talking about that. So I think that's a basic scope of what could happen in the sports world, of some of the stuff that got said there. But I think we've reached a pretty good stopping point on today's show. Just make sure that you understand that the Democrats are going to be pushing this fundraising bonanza up the wazoo. Understand that not to donate to politicians. Make sure that goes to mutual aid. Have the understanding that this is not going to be won through electoralism. If we make the ability to turn this around, it's going to happen through direct action. Even when you go back to the gay rights to marriage, even that, as recent as that was, a lot of people forget that came to fruition through direct action, not electoralism. And when we are in the place that we are in the United States at this time, our victories are going to come through direct action, which is why what James Fauntleroy of Revolutionary Blackout Network talks about in that is flipping that 80-20 split on electoralism and direct action. As he says, flip that to 80% direct action and mutual aid, 20% electoralism. And that even if you make that vote with minimal investment, do not count on anything getting turned around in that political arena. But just know that it's going to be a really uphill battle. I know that some people talked about how I think Argentinians and Mexicans reacted in when they fought back for abortion rights. But the United States is a whole different monster. Just keep that in mind because the police state is is on a whole nother level here compared to what you see in the global south. But as I say, we gotta start somewhere with another mass movement. And if this is the moment that sparks one, good. But I also at the same time, when activists make demands to improve the potential victory of said movement, they need to be listened to. Their things need to be included too, even if they're not directly related to the original cause. Otherwise, you're just going to have another Black Lives Matter again, where that leadership enriches themselves, buys themselves mansions, and they live a better life, while the conditions of the people who came out in support of that had no material change. And they just mainly shifted that money into the Democratic Party. And just understand if a big mass movement does happen to come of this, you have to be very wary of the people who try to call themselves the leaders of the movement and then trying to pump that money into the Democratic Party while ignoring the demands of activists. A lot like that Black Lives Matter leadership did when activists started to bring the demands of defund the police. They were ignored. The Black Lives Matter leadership essentially had Trump derangement syndrome, which was pretty translates to nothing of material improvement for the Black lives that they were supposed to advocate for. So just keep that in mind, because there will be ingenuine, nefarious leaders who aren't really truly about a real victory when these, if anything, does come to the forefront in a big way. But only time will tell. Thanks to y'all for coming out for today's episode of the Rochford Files. Next show will probably be Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. try to get back more to that'll be a more normal show where cover a few different topics rather than be like squarely focused on one for the most part while working in some other points. Oh yeah, I gotta get that March for Medicare for All thing up on the screen because I said I was going to promote that before leaving here today. And I will. Give me a moment to get that up on the screen. July 30th. Let me get the photo up for you. Here we go. So, from Savage Joy Marie, someone who is getting ignored a lot by big indie left media channels, especially as she is came out against the Red Berets' whole Washington state by state approach. That has caused her to get like kind of blackballed by some parts of indie left media. But let's look at this. So, this event fundraiser, Fight for Our Medicare for All, and this will be June 29th at 9 p.m. Eastern. So that'll be next Wednesday. And this will have appearances by Marianne Williamson, Jimmy Dore, Elias Cepeda, Robert Durden, Courtney and Keisha, the Bank Sisters, hosted by Savage Joy Marie, and music by a recent guest of the show, Jesse Jett, in his Cy Oppenheimer look. So yeah, that's the next March for Medicare for All event. And important event to promote since pushing for a universal healthcare system is one of the biggest things we could be doing right now. But there's a lot of big things we could get done. So I like to try to spread support towards all of it, to be honest, while not like because I believe I'm in that position to where I don't have to put all my focus into focusing for one main thing. But so check out that event on next Wednesday. So with that being said, enjoy the rest of your weekend. This is Andrew Rochford saying goodbye and good night.